Justice in America with CBS News correspondent Eric Sevareid.
The American people live with a crime wave that begins to look like a permanent tide. An estimated 10 million serious crimes were committed last year, only about half of them ever reported. There are more murders in a year in New York City than in England, Belgium, Austria, Switzerland, Norway, and Denmark combined. Everybody has his own favorite explanation. An increasingly popular culprit or scapegoat is the court system. Crime is the sorest pressure point of public doubts about our system of justice. And the courts, we are told, beginning with the Supreme Court, are too lenient with criminals. If only the matter were that simple. The first complication lies in the hard fact that only about 20% of serious crimes result in arrest, and only about 80% of that 20% ever reach a court. So the judges, lenient or otherwise, never see the majority of criminals. The leniency accusation is further complicated by the observation that American courts give harsher sentences than the courts in Europe, save for the communist countries. The courts are just one link in the chain that begins with family, neighborhood, school, and job. It includes the police, and it ends with the prison or the probation office. Nevertheless, the condition, the attitudes and processes of the court do bear upon the degree and the nature of crime. Just how and how much? Whole communities grope for the answers. For this last in our series of broadcasts on the American court system, we went to one community which is groping furiously, experimenting, arguing it out. Denver, Colorado. This is the place that Horace Greeley was talking about when he advised young men to go west to this promising little mining settlement. They listened to Greeley. Now Denver is urban America, a place with commuter suburbs and big league football, with bristling new landmarks and a restless population. 10% black, 12% Mexican American. A metropolis that has kept the image of America's memory optimistic, expansive, and wholesome. But the wholesome spirit is fading. In the growth from frontier town to urban center, more than the air has become tainted. Like most American cities, Denver is also suffering from a form of social pollution. In crime, as in sports, in business and defense, Denver has made the big time.
At one time, you felt safe being out at night. You felt safe having your children play in the park or your wife out at night. But now it's hardly safe for a man to be out.
That's my apartment house right now. I'm walking towards my house.
Crime in the streets of Denver is rising at a steeper rate than in almost any other city. Last year, only New York and Detroit had a greater increase in the number of burglaries. No city had a greater increase in rapes. There's been a plague of auto thefts.
A policeman advised me to have a gun in the house, that a dog was not enough. Well, I won't have a gun in the house because I don't believe in this. But the police accept that this is an unsafe neighborhood.
24th among cities in size, Denver now stands 14th in the number of serious crimes. And Greater Denver's crime rate is higher than Washington's or Chicago's. The law is under challenge in the streets, the law and its institutions.
I know I've been in a couple of car thefts and things of that nature, but other than that and some other things, nothing else, you know, except for I got arrested a couple of times for house burglaries, which I never have done.
Bum rap.
Mm-hmm. The police, man, they take you down there for investigation, this and that, you know. If you're just known to them, you know, they just take you down there, you know, for no reason at all. They can pick you up for looking at them wrong, man. Say you're harassing them or something like that. The police in Denver, man, they think they rule Denver. I have a younger brother, you know, and he was only 14, you know. And that dude was public enemy #1, you know. You know, he'd carry a gun, you know, and, you know, go on like that, you know.
How do you feel about 14-year-olds who carry guns, whether they're
well,
Vietnamese
look, you got your police roaming the streets, and they got guns.
His Honor, George Menerbino, presiding judge of the Denver County Courts, interviewed by correspondent Bill Stout.
This public mood, that there's been too much soft treatment of criminals, you feel a pressure from the public to get tougher?
Yes, quite frankly, we do feel that. However, we must conduct a fair and impartial trial.
And in too many instances, I do feel that the criticism is unwarranted. The judge, being in a peculiar position, can't come out and say, well, from now on, I'm going to give every shoplifter 6 months in jail. You just can't do that.
I can't possibly see this idea of give a maximum penalty to every person that appears before you.
Judge Manorvino's colleague on the county bench, Judge Zita L. Weinshank.
And I was really frightened one day driving home from work and turning on my car radio to hear one of the major radio stations in Denver, right after the election, say, we're urging every judge to impose maximum penalties in every case. Now, can you imagine what would happen if, with every college kid that I get on a shoplifting case, I put that youngster in jail for 6 months, because that's the maximum penalty on a shoplifting case, 6 months and $300. These are the people you want to give opportunities to, and the repeated violators are the ones that you really want to slap and slap hard. Does this make sense to you?
Yes, and if the radio station can be taken as at all representative of the community, then there is a hardline mood, a demand for getting tough.
I think so. I think we are tough. I really do.
Denver has a national reputation where justice is concerned, a reputation for being neither tough nor soft, but fair and progressive. But here in their own community, it's the people versus the courts. The courts are taking the rap for an entire system. And no part of the system is really blameless. Courts, police, prosecutors, the institutions for correction, the community itself.
David Ibarra, in the second count of the information, you're charged with the crime of accessory after the fact, possession of narcotic drugs. What say, guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty. Guilty.
Well, now, which is it, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
It's hard enough sometimes to understand the language of justice, harder still to respect it when justice blinks at truth. In several routine cases that we observed, the crime was adjusted to fit the punishment. The original charge was burglary.
Your Honor, we have reached a disposition in this case. At this time, the people would move orally to add a third count to both defendants, charging them with possession of burglary tools, a 2-year felony. I should state at this time that we have no evidence of actual burglary tools, that this is merely a plea negotiation.
All right, Albert A. Gibson, in the third count of the information, you're charged with the crime of possession of burglary tools. What say you to that charge? Guilty or not? Pardon?
Guilty.
In effect, the defendants are pleading guilty to a crime they did not commit. There were no burglary tools. And the state is excusing them from a more serious crime, which it thinks they did commit, the crime of burglary. The maximum penalty for burglary is 10 years. For burglary tools, it's 2 years.
Now, have any threats or promises been made to you to induce you to enter this plea, or these pleas?
No, sir.
Has anybody guaranteed you how the case is going to come out?
No, sir.
And is this plea your free and voluntary act? These pleas? Okay, the court will accept them.
For all the technicalities, all the deals and delays, for all the guaranteed rights, the Denver courts convict 77 out of every 100 defendants even charged with serious crimes. That is slightly higher than the national average, before or since those controversial Supreme Court rulings. 2/3 of the cases end like this one, guilty without even going to trial.
Okay, now you both have to go down to the probation office this morning. There's certain information that they require from you. I would suggest that you be truthful with them. Don't try to conceal anything, because you've already admitted your guilt.
The sentence will be probation. That is another issue between the people and the courts. The public is thirsting for punishment. The judges are looking for corrections. Enlightened judges are reluctant to put young criminals behind bars. This is a general fact about American justice, a fact that rankles the American public. To try to understand the court's doubts about prisons, we asked Judge Robert Kingsley to join us in a visit to the Colorado State Penitentiary. The standard image of America's prisons, antiquated, overcrowded, has little to do with the penitentiary at Canyon City. At a time when crime is rising, Canyon City is only 2/3 full. And to many citizens of crime-troubled Denver, this means the courts are letting too many criminals off the hook. Some critics, furthermore, have labeled the prison itself a resort. To visiting Judge Kingsley and his host, Warden Wayne Patterson, it is only a last resort, a place to send repeated offenders only when other means have failed.
Yes, Judge, really, we don't get any what you would call a real first offender anymore.
Except a murder or something like that.
Murder or a wild occasion of a stick-up. You might get a person who the offense was of such nature that he's a first offender, but very seldom. Most of them have been either in a reformatory, boys' school, or some other institution.
Well, now, the average inmate who comes here, if he wants an education or training in something, you do have that available to him.
Yes. Now, in certain areas, of course, Judge, we have several areas of training, body and fender, automotive, electrical, small appliance repair. We have a good many areas where we actually have accredited vocational training. And hopefully we get some of these younger prisoners into those areas if they're, able to pass the tests and that type of thing to qualify.
Making license plates is not an accredited vocation. There's no market for that job skill outside prison walls. No market for some of the other skills either for a man with a prison record. Only 1 out of 5 inmates takes a real job training course. And at Canyon City, the opportunities are far better than in most places. And so is the mood of the prison.
Of course, we don't have any rough treatment in the prison. Prisoners are made as comfortable as possible because we believe that they're generally sent here as punishment and not for punishment. And as a result, they do have quite a little latitude.
Free of the usual overcrowding, Canyon City claims to be free also of the homosexual rapes that are rampant in many prisons. But even a progressive prison like this claims no cure for crime.
We have men who have committed burglaries and stick-ups whose only problem is addiction.
There are perhaps 200 addicts at Canyon City, but there is no effective treatment for them here, no methadone program, for instance, only counseling. And it's the addicts who are the most likely to become recidivists, repeaters.
Recidivism, of course, I have kind of a mental block on recidivism rates, numbers, because I feel that we're dealing with people, not numbers and not percentages. Now, we know, for example, in this prison, that 25% return at least once.
1 out of 4 come back to Canyon City and others wind up in other institutions. Prisons rarely rehabilitate. They fail to deter many from further crime. And the worst prisons, the most overcrowded, are the ones with the highest rate of repeaters. These facts are why many judges are reluctant to throw the book at young offenders, why 5 out of 10 criminals in Denver do not go to prison, they get probation. But while the prisons have been thinned out, the probation services are overloaded. The purpose of probation, close supervision, counseling on jobs and drugs, that purpose is being frustrated by sheer numbers.
How you doing, Bob?
All right, how are you?
Miss Bates? How are you?
Fine, thank you.
My particular caseload is 150 at this time. By far too many. The ideal casework load would approximately between 50 and 60. Well, it's rather obvious that with the size of the caseloads, it's rather difficult. I've got to scrutinize my caseload and take the most difficult cases and work with them. I feel that under the circumstances that we're doing the best job that we could possibly do.
How effective is probation? 5 out of 6 in Denver finish their probation terms without getting into serious trouble. Reporting in once a week, usually for 2 years. But the effect is often temporary. Out of 22 defendants whose cases we observed in felony courts, more than half were graduates of the probation system. All but one of those had been in trouble with the law ever since they were children. The vast iceberg beneath the surface of crime is juvenile crime. Half of all serious offenses, larceny, burglary, auto theft, are committed by people under 18. And 15-year-olds commit more than any other single age group, juvenile or adult. To these appalling statistics, Denver, Colorado contributes even more than its full share. A tide of felonies by school children, violence and vandalism in the schools themselves. Most habitual criminals have records going back to childhood, back to the juvenile courts. And these courts have been portrayed as little more than accomplices. Among the most vocal critics are some of Denver's school teachers.
We're having a great deal of difficulty with our kids that we refer to the court. The only time we ever refer a kid is when we really need him to be in this court. And the judge will sit there and look at the kid and he likes the color of his eyes and he throws him right back out into the community.
But what's he going to do with him? And
well,
I'm not defending the juvenile
okay,
court, but
there are some answers to this. In our city, we do not have a law that says that parents have to be responsible for their child's actions. And because of this, our kids enjoy much freedom breaking into our schools and committing $7,000, $8,000, and $9,000 worth of damage. You read about it every day in the paper. That kid goes before a juvenile court judge and he's patted on the head and he's told, now you were bad, you did something terrible, but we're going to let you go this time. Never looking at his past record, saying 15, 16, 18 times this kid's been in on malicious mischief. He loves to tear up property, but he enjoys doing this because he knows he can't be touched for it.
You shouldn't wonder why, when you look at ghettos and the conditions under which many of these kids have to operate, why we have the crime rates that we do have.
Jerry Luttrell, I would agree with you up to a certain point, and I don't think any of us would question the juvenile courts have been too lenient.
I was sitting at my desk one day and a kid threw a Coke bottle right through my window and it just barely missed me. And reporting this, I was told just to skip it. We even knew who did it, but we couldn't do a thing about it.
why didn't you go to the police with this, or to the juvenile court with this case?
Well, with what I know about the juvenile court and its permissiveness here in our city, there was no reason for me to fight it if I couldn't get backing from anybody else, because this kid would have been taken down there and like we mentioned earlier, he would have beaten the police officer writing up the case arrest right out of the court.
What has been your experience in court? What do you think about all of it?
Yeah, I've been in there about 4 times.
For what?
For car theft, burglary, for burglary, shoplifting, and car theft.
How was the judge?
Well, the judge was pretty fair.
He was. In what way?
You know, when I told him what we'd done and that, you know, he let us go and that. You know, he believed us and that. And he said, I told him that I'll never go there, I'll never do it again, you know, and he believed me.
Was that the first time, or the second, or the third?
It's about the second time.
Did you see the same judge the next time?
Yes.
What did he say then?
Well, he just told me, well, you're back in here again and all that. And I told him, yeah. And he goes, what are we going to do with you? I go, well, just give me one more chance and I'll never go back in here again. And then he just let me go and released me.
That was the third time?
Yes.
Did you see the same judge the fourth time?
No.
Different judge? What did he say?
Well, I can't, you know, quite remember that. Why, he just, you know, just let me go too, you know.
Young man, do you understand the gravity of the situation with which you're faced?
Yes, sir.
And do you, madam, understand?
Yes, sir.
Is he doing pretty well at home? Madam?
Yes, sir, he does very well at home.
Do you have other children?
There is an air of ineffectuality about the whole juvenile process, not just in Denver, but wherever there are children and crime.
The court instructs you and your mother that you obey your mother and that you stay out of trouble. You're much too young to be before a court, and yet you're trying to act like an adult. Do what is best and do what your mother tells you to do.
Thank you, sir.
That you did feloniously, wantonly, unlawfully, willfully, and maliciously destroy, and injure the personal property of the Denver Public Schools. You did then and there feloniously, willfully, and maliciously break and enter, and without force enter, the building of the Denver Public Schools. You understand what the charges are?
Yeah.
You mean yes?
Yes.
We don't say yeah in this courtroom.
In tough courts or soft, the judge's choice is a narrow one. He can send children to a correctional institution, which rarely corrects, often corrupts, or he can put them on probation and send them home, which is often the source of their problems.
And you understand the charges that have been alleged here? You know what alleged means?
No, I don't.
Judge Theodore Rubin came under fire for not locking up enough juveniles, so the Denver voters felt. In last fall's election, they voted him off the bench.
I'd like to point out that the law compels a judge to strengthen family ties wherever possible, and this is written into our laws and the laws of just about every state in the nation. It compels us to maintain a child in his own home if at all possible, and to do everything to strengthen his adjustment in the community. And look, if 70% of youngsters recidivate out of an institution, if they come out and get in further trouble and go back in or to a higher institution, then it says to me that institutionalization is not what the panacea that some people propose.
But what else is there?
Well, we need an enormous array of alternatives in the community. I sought to place much more pressure on community agencies, the schools, the mental health clinics, the family and children's agencies, private and public, and to say, look, we have to search ourselves as to why these youngsters are not making it.
And all this added up to a feeling on the part of many persons in the community that you were soft.
That's right, and I was seen that way. The whole area of understanding delinquency has gone from the woodshed theory and the printing names in the newspaper and that will stop delinquency to a more complexified sociological understanding, and now back to a simple approach, get the kids out of the way, be firm, be tough again.
The woodshed in Denver is admittedly gentle, the juvenile detention hall. It's a taste of confinement close to home, and most serious offenders or repeated offenders do time there along the way. Overnight, a few days, sometimes a few weeks while awaiting trial. But sooner or later they go home. Steve has been brought in for running away from home, brought in this time with a knife wound in his arm.
First thing is, you have a right to remain silent. You don't have to discuss these charges with me unless you want to do so, knowing that anything you tell me I will use in court. You understand that? Do you?
At 14, Steve is in the detention hall for the 5th time. He has been brought in before for theft, shoplifting, robbing 5 or 6 houses. He has also been under the supervision of a probation officer, one visit with him for every week of life with his family.
If I released you today from the hall, how long do you think you'd stay out this time? What's the problem getting along with your dad and mom?
My mom doesn't even live there.
Do you know where she lives? When was the last time you saw her?
About a year ago.
What did she do, just leave the family?
For running away from home, Steve was given probation. 2 weeks later, he was arrested again for burglary. Sent home to wait for trial, he committed another burglary. He is now in a state school for boys. That was also the route that Phil Gallegos followed, from juvenile court to reform school and then on to adult crime. He is now serving time under sentence by the Denver courts, serving it while keeping his job and living at home. The sentence is probation, a 1-year term, and that's the longest he's been out of trouble with the law since he was 7 years old. The difference is this: his supervisor is not one of Denver's overburdened probation staff, but a local businessman, an insurance agent named Rupert Hernandez. Hernandez has a caseload of 1, Phil Gallegos.
Now might be ideal time.
Like Hernandez, there are 1,000 Denver citizens, businessmen, housewives, students, working without pay for the local courts as volunteer probation counselors, each with 1 case at a time. It is one of the few upbeat scenes in the whole crime picture. Denver's program was started by Judge William H. Burnett.
There are many people that complain about the crime problem. Many people that cry for law and order, and we all believe in law and order. It's my belief that you represent the people that really are doing something about law and order. And in my opinion, this is not a solution to the crime problem. This is the solution to the crime problem.
No one, including Burnett and his volunteers, no one has come up with an answer to the problem of the hardened criminal. This form of probation is applied only to repeaters of lesser crimes to keep them from going the hard crime route.
The first premise that we work on is that 80 to 90% of the persons who commit felonies, these are the serious offenses, have first been before us for minor offenses that we call misdemeanors. This means that this is really the only chance we have before a person does something serious. The concept of the volunteer probation counselor has now spread to probably 500 to 600 courts throughout the nation. Many are just getting started with this idea. But here's a simple concept, a very American concept, where individual citizens who are concerned with the crime problem can play a part and should play a part.
Robert Lotito, a Denver advertising man, has just taken on his third probationer, a school dropout with a lengthy record of court appearances, the last on a car theft charge.
I feel different since I got out of jail about myself, what I want to do, what I want to be. I think I'd be a good citizen, I guess.
Well, no, you're the guy that has to make up your mind on that.
Yeah, that's true.
Let me tell you this. I'm going to give you my card, Ron, and keep that with you. And the telephone number that's on there is an answering service at night. That number is good 24 hours a day, so you can reach me. And hopefully you won't get into trouble, but if you do, you can call in.
Hopefully, yeah.
But I mean, not only if you get in trouble, but anytime you feel that you need to talk, okay?
Oh.
And this kid hasn't done anything really serious, but if he continues, or if he goes back to jail again and meets some pretty bad types, or unless somebody takes some time and works with him and helps him, he could develop into a pretty bad kind of a person, a really serious criminal. No, I don't think this program is one of leniency. I think this is a program of hope.
In the 5 years the program has been operating in Denver, about 5,000 repeated lawbreakers have been put on this form of probation. One citizen, one case. The rate of recidivism, of rearrests on criminal charges, is only about half what it is normally for the same kind of cases. During the same 5 years in Denver, there have been almost 7,000 robberies, more than 48,000 burglaries, there have been 1,500 rapes. Denver, with its involved and hopeful citizens, with its progressive courts, its progressive prisons, and its progressive crime rate, Denver is an example of a national dilemma. The courts, even at their best, seem powerless to stop crime. But it is the courts that somehow must cope with crime. That charge against the courts, the charge of leniency. It may be that judges will have to give up earlier on some people they are now trying to save, may have to put them behind bars in society's interest. But for others, the alternative, probation, will also have to be given a better chance to prove itself. Probation systems are rarely equipped to do the job they're supposed to do.
I think that the issue is not are the courts being too lenient when they come to sentence, but are they sentencing people to anything that makes sense as far as making them less likely to commit the crime again. And there, I think the answer is very probably no. I think the people who ought to be in prisons are those people who we have to have there because they're too dangerous to be outside. But the choice isn't between doing nothing and putting them in prison.
Well, that's what we want to come
to here. It seems to me that the choice, there is a middle ground, and that is subjecting them to some supervision, keeping some thread or hold on them after they have been convicted, so that they do not
they're not free to go back into the same kind of spiral that they were in before. It can take the form of living during the day, living during the evening in a dormitory type residential area and going to school or going to work during the day. But somebody's keeping a check on him. He has some responsibility for his life. As he shows he can take that responsibility, give him some more. I think if rehabilitation is the dominant motive, we will in almost every case try to do something other than lock him up. I think they really do learn a lot about crime in prison. I think they, not necessarily new techniques, but a kind of an acceptance of criminality of a way of life.
I think if a guy got busted the first time and was put in an institution like this and left for about a week and turned out, I believe he'd go straight. But if he's put in here and it's his first time, he don't know nothing anyway. And he's eager to learn. And he gets in with people that's been doing crime for years and years, and his head gets this big and he figures he can just go out and do everything. And he goes out and tries it, and then he comes right back. Mother.
The softest spot in the courts is not deliberate leniency, but inefficiency. If the courts are to make any impression on an offender, there must be a proved link between a man's acts and their consequences, between crime and punishment. But that link is being weakened by the court's delay and obscured by the bargaining of justice.
You got a good lawyer, you got this reduced to assault and battery, which is much better than the 1 to 10 that you're charged with. You understand that,
Yes,
don't
sir,
you?
I do.
The system of criminal justice. The judges in their courts hold crucial powers of decision. But we conclude, at best, they do not have the power to deter crime. The real deterrent is arrest, the moment criminals say they fear the most. And the real power to change a man's course from crime lies not with the courts, but with a system of correction.
People don't die in jails. They always get back out on the street, or almost always. When they do, if our correction system has worked, it will have had an effect upon them, and we'll have less crime. If it has had no effect or has had an adverse effect, we're likely to have more crime. And our problem is that the body politic, the American people, aren't anxious to spend more money on corrections. They're anxious to spend more money on police, apparently, and the police need more resources and funds. But we've got to have a balanced system, and it'll really come eventually from the people voting through their representatives to put the resources in the whole system, from police to prosecutor to courts to corrections.
The courts do not make crime. They are only its custodians, and only for a little while. A judge is a fallible human working in a misty half-light of general knowledge about the nature of the criminal impulse. He usually has to decide in hours or even minutes how a given offender will react to punishment or treatment. A psychiatrist can take months and still be wrong. But the court's brief moment can be a crucial one, because when we talk about America's crime, we are talking very largely about America's youth, and that means America's future. 10 of the biggest cities have recently reported some reduction in crime. Washington, D.C., the city with the sharpest reduction, has new drug treatment facilities. Another, Pittsburgh, has organized a concerted attack on dope pushers. And all 10 cities have enlarged or improved their police forces. Most of the 10 have also speeded up court procedures. They haven't toughened sentences, just cut down the time between arrest and trial. So courts do play an important role in the struggle against crime, though not exactly the role that so many Americans think they play. One way to judge the values of a society is to measure how it spends its money. Well, we spend $5 billion a year for the entire criminal justice system, including all courts, police, prosecutors, corrections. We spend $2 billion more than that for military research and development, and $1 billion more than that so far on the defective F-111 warplane. But belief in the reality of justice is absolutely essential to democratic and civilized living. We have tried to show in these 3 one-hour broadcasts on the courts and the poor, on court congestion, on the courts and crime, the widening gap between our ideal of justice and today's reality. It is not beyond the wit and resources of the country to close the gap. Where common crime is concerned, we have no choice. An America that lives scared won't live free. This is Eric Severide.
Mr. Hall, the court will impose a punishment which it hopes will be just under the circumstances. Hopes it will impress you with the seriousness of carrying a gun. You have had some punishment already by virtue of having been jailed when you were first arrested. The court will impose a sentence of 90 days in jail plus a $100 fine. In view of your prior clear record, I'm going to conditionally suspend the jail sentence upon two conditions. If you do violate the law again, you will have whatever new penalty is involved plus this 90-day sentence. The second condition that I am going to impose is that you contribute a total of 5 days of work on a court-assigned work project. And I sincerely hope that as the result of this sentence, you will not find it necessary to carry a gun again.